and welcome to another video in our DCG Student Assignment series. In this video we will be looking at output 2, the design feature comparison. In particular, what we'll be looking at is we'll look at the examiner's marking scheme, we'll look at the overall output 2 requirements, we'll look at output 2 page 1 and page 2 specific requirements, the considerations while choosing the two artifacts to use in output 2, and also laying out output 2 page 1 and page 2 to effectively maximize the marks that you can get in this output. So first of all, we'll have a look at the overall marks going for output 2. What you'll first of all notice is that the criteria for marking, as well as the way that the marks are allocated, are exactly the same as in output 1. So the first part and the bulk of the marks go for relevant criteria considered. So that's any text that you put in, any images, any sketches. They get the bulk of the marks, so they get the 13. Then the rest of the marks go for your presentation. So for the presentation we have 2 marks. So that will be all about making sure that your format is good, making sure that all of your text and your images are laid out in a nice way so that it's very easy to follow. Then what we have is the amount of marks that the output is worth is 15. Okay, so 15 marks overall, and that's 9% of the overall project, just like it was in output 1. So moving on from the marking scheme, then we'll have a look at the output 2 requirements. So the first one is a selection of appropriate images. That's going to be in page number 1. Then we have the main dimensions are inserted, and the important thing with that is that we make sure that we think about the conventions for doing our dimensioning, okay? Because to get the full marks for there, we'll have to have used the proper conventions. The third one then is the comparison of the main design features, which we'll look at in page 1 and page 2. Fourth one is contrasting the main design features, which will be predominantly in page 2. And finally, we have the effective layout and presentation of the information, combining images, sketches and annotations. So that'll be throughout, making sure that we keep our layout consistent and that it's easy to follow from the beginning to the end. Now, in terms of the marks for them, then the first 4 is where the 13 marks are going for, and the last one then is the 2 marks for the presentation. Okay, and also just to mention that in particular in 3 and mostly in 4, we have to always be thinking about the why in terms of everything that we're looking at in terms of contrasting and comparing our design features. Now let's have a look at some of the more practical aspects of output 2, and in particular what we need to put onto the 2 pages of it. So in output 2 page 1, what we're looking for is we're looking for information about both artifacts. We're not really comparing them to each other yet. We're just getting all of the information about them onto the page. So first of all, what we'll need is a large sketch of each output, including the main dimensions. And again, the conventions will be very important in that, okay? That we use the proper drawing conventions to draw in those dimensions. The second thing then is the general features of each artifact, including the year of design. Now, the year of design is important in the 2018 project because it's referred to in the brief. Then we want 2 unique features of each artifact with 1 sketch for each. So we want to figure out what makes the 2 artifacts that you've chosen, what makes them special, okay? We need 2 of those. Then finally, we'll look for the pros and the cons of each artifact. Now that's individual, not comparing to each other yet. Just if you look at them in isolation, what are the pros and cons of each one of your artifacts? Then on output 2 page 2, what we'll be looking for is 3 keyword comparisons. Those keywords need to come from output 1, okay? And the reason that they need to be there is that the whole point of the DCG project is to make sure that you're telling a story. So you start at the beginning with your brief, you end at the end with your own design. And making sure that those keywords are in output 1, make sure that that story is coherent and it goes from the beginning all the way to the end. For each one of those keyword comparisons then, what we're looking for is we're looking for a short paragraph about how the keyword is shown in each artifact. We're looking for a sketch of each artifact which shows and demonstrates the points made in the short paragraphs. So if you've spoken about a particular characteristic of one of your artifacts, you do a sketch to explain that point that you've made. Then we also need then the final verdict as to which artifact is better. Now this is the most important part because it's the part that you're really doing your comparison, okay? What you're doing is you're taking all 6 keyword comparisons into account and you're saying which one is better, and the most important thing is why, okay? The why is where you get the marks in this output, so you need to make sure that you're always thinking about why something is better than something else, or why something works, or why a keyword is shown in a particular way in a particular artifact. Again, I can't stress enough how important the why is. So now that we know where the marks go for output 2 and the requirements in terms of the overall requirements and the requirements that go onto the 2 pages, we now need to start thinking about which 2 artifacts we want to choose for our comparison. So the first artifact is the more important of the 2 because that's the one that you're going to be modeling in SOLIDWORKS. So we need to think about many things when it comes to that. First of all, it needs to have 5 parts. Okay, now you don't really want to have any more than 5. If it does have more than 5, you only want it to be maybe 6, at the very most 7. Okay, so take that into account. Then it must be complex enough to demonstrate your SOLIDWORKS skills. So while minimalist designs are very nice to look at, they won't be very good for the DCG student assignment because they probably won't have enough parts in it. Okay, so you need to think about that. And also you need to think about that if it's very minimalist, it probably won't be complex enough to show your skills and to get the marks for the SOLIDWORKS aspect. It also mustn't be too difficult that you will not be able to model it in SOLIDWORKS. So you need to be realistic about your SOLIDWORKS skills. Because if you take on something too difficult, there's a chance you mightn't get it finished, and in which case then you won't get all the marks for SOLIDWORKS, and it'll mean that you'll be very stressed when it comes to actually doing the modeling in November and December, and then subsequently when you come back from your Christmas holidays in January. The second artifact then is slightly less important than the artifact 1 because you won't be modeling it in SOLIDWORKS. But you need to take into account that you're going to be comparing it to the first artifact. So what I always try to say to my students is to try to make sure that it's as different from artifact 1 as possible. And that'll give you the most different keywords and the most different aspects for comparison. You must also be able to find sufficient info, so the size, the internal technology, the materials, etc. online, because you won't be putting in as much time into this one. And if you can find some form of fact sheets online about it, then it will make your life a lot easier. Okay. Above all, don't choose something that you can't find all of the information about. Okay. Find a different mouse if you can't find information. Then just bear in mind that if there's a time aspect to the brief, try to find an artifact from a different era. So in the 2018 one for mice, it does mention the time. So look for a mouse that's from a different era in time. So for example, if your first artifact was designed in the 90s, maybe try find a mouse that was designed in the 90s or in the 80s for your comparison piece for your artifact 2. Moving on then, this is the layout I would suggest for your output 2 page 1. Now it's important when you're doing your layout is that you want it to be as creative as you can make it. So if you don't want it to look like this, that's absolutely fine. But just make sure that you include all of the different aspects that I've put into this page. Okay. While being creative, also bear in mind that you need to keep the same font as output 1. And you also want to keep your text being your 10 point again, which is the same as in output 1. So what we have is I have a line just down the middle here separating the two. Because in the output 2 page 1, you're not comparing one artifact to the other yet. You're just talking about them in isolation individually. So you'll first of all have a large image or sketch of your artifact 1 with the dimensions, and again making sure that you use your conventions, and make sure that the image is referenced if you found it online. Then you'll have a part that where you have your general features of your artifact 1, and that'll be just a bullet point summary. So things like the year it was designed, what exactly it's used for, what group of people is it designed for, and just its general. Does it have a laser pointer down in the bottom, or does it have a wheel, and then how many buttons it has, things like that. Then you'll look at the first unique feature that your artifact 1 has, and that'll be a paragraph and a sketch. So what is it that makes your first artifact special and makes it stand out? You'll be writing about that and putting in a sketch, just trying to explain your feature. Okay, the sketch doesn't have to be of the entire mouse. It just has to be showing that feature that you're trying to talk about. Then again, you'll have a second feature, and again, this is a second feature that makes it stand out from the crowd, and the reason why you chose your first artifact. And again, that'll be in a paragraph and a sketch, and the sketch again looking at the aspect that you're talking about, not all of the mouse. Then you'll put in your pros and your cons for artifact 1 individually, and that'll be 3 bullet points each. So 3 pros for your first artifact and 3 cons for your artifact. So that will just show that you're looking at the artifacts in sufficient depth before you compare them to one another. Then the same exact points need to be made about the second artifact. So you'll have your large sketch or image, and again referenced. You'll have your general features of artifact 2. You'll have your first unique feature of artifact 2, your second unique feature of artifact 2, and then your pros and your cons of artifact 2. So the 2 pages should look very similar. The two sides of the pages should look very similar, but just writing about the 2 separate artifacts. Finally, we have the suggested layout for output 2 page 2, and once again, try to be creative about your layout, but making sure that you keep the same font and you keep it at 10 points for the size of your text. Okay. Now, what we have here is we have 6 keywords or groups of keywords, and we have a final verdict. Now, in terms of your keyword or your group of keywords, they need to come from your output 1. But what I mean by a group is that you have 14 keywords in output 1. If you want to group 1 or 2 or even 3 of them together, you can, but the keywords need to be from output 1. Okay, it'll just be more than one at the same time. Now, we need to make sure that we have 6. If you have a 7th that you want to put in, that'd be great. Just find a space for it somewhere on the page. So in each one of these boxes, then we'll see what we need to put into each keyword or group that we're comparing under. We first of all need to put in a paragraph about the first artifact. So that's just talking about how the keyword or the group of keywords are shown in your artifact 1. Then the same for artifact 2. And then we do the comparison and we think about why. Now, the most important thing when we're looking at the keywords is we're looking for a verdict, which one is better, or if it's a draw, and then why. Okay, the why is absolutely vital to make sure that you get your point across and that you get the marks for your comparison. What you're looking for then is you're looking for one sketch for each artifact that is related to the paragraph above. Now, the sketch again doesn't have to be of the entire artifact. It can just be of a small part of it, showing the keyword or group that you're looking at in that particular time. Okay, and we do that 6 times, exactly the same each time. So a paragraph on the first artifact, a paragraph on the second artifact, and then a verdict and a why. Okay, so why in every single one is absolutely vital to make sure that we get all of the marks. After we've looked at all of the keywords, then what we're looking for is we're looking for a final verdict and which artifact is the best. Now, the winner of this doesn't necessarily have to be the one that you're going to model, but in reality it would be better if it was. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to pick the one that won, but hopefully the one that won is the one that you're going to model. And again, the why is absolutely vital in this. Okay, why is one better than the other one? But what we also want to look at is in page 1 of your output 2, we looked at the pros and cons of each. Okay, and what we want to make sure is that we don't just forget about those that they were just in the page 1. We want to make sure that we take it into account in our final verdict. And what that does is it just makes sure that you continue on the story of your project from the beginning to the end, and you haven't put anything in to one output that you're not going to refer to again in another one. It also shows that each artifact has its own advantages and its own disadvantages, and that while you're comparing one to another, they can't be discounted in terms of deciding which one is overall the better of the two. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this video on output 2. If you did, please comment below and subscribe to the DCGist to be the first to see new videos. And also you can follow us on Twitter at the DCGist or on Facebook at the DCGist as well. And also you'll be able to find all of the videos and all of the blogs on the DCGist.com. Best of luck with output 2, and we'll see you later.